Welcome back, guys. First video of 2025 and hopefully one of many. I hope you guys had an awesome Christmas holiday and a good start into the new year, 2025. Today we are doing something a little bit different. We are looking at two pieces of equipment, and I am essentially going to give something like a purchase recommendation to beginners, maybe people who have been doing some push-ups, some pull-ups at home, but they want to get a little bit more serious about working out. Maybe you've been going to a gym for the past year, maybe half a year, but you've moved to a new place, to a rural area, maybe, where you would have to drive for a long time to get to a gym. And so you've become interested in working out at home. Or maybe you've never worked out before and you want to get into working out and you're looking to buy some equipment. Whatever it may be. I think the two most basic pieces of equipment you can buy when it comes to working out are dumbbells and a barbell. Now, dumbbells and barbells are both incredible tools for working out. In my opinion, they are generally superior to any other types of equipment for the simple reason that you can train a lot of different things with them. And if you have a barbell with a sufficient amount of weight, you don't need anything else to work out. Or if you have a pair of dumbbells, you don't need anything else. If you look at something like resistance bands, depending on what you want to train, you do need something to attach the resistance band to. Or if we're looking at a pull-up bar, that pull-up bar has to be attached to something. It has to be somewhere, right? And be fastened into a doorway or what have you to be able to actually do pull-ups. And the awesome thing about free weights is that once you have them, you can just use them. And the only thing you might have to stock up on at some point is more weight. However, if you are not someone who is putting together an entire home gym right now, you're just looking to buy a little bit of equipment to get into working out a little bit more. Maybe you're just looking to buy some equipment to use at home during times when you don't manage to get to the gym. So perhaps this is just a backup plan for you. You're actually more of a gym goer, but sometimes you don't have the motivation, you don't have the time to get to the gym, and you want a little bit of equipment at home so you can do like a discount version of your regular workout. And that's kind of where we get into the topic of today's video. Which one should you buy first? Assuming we are not just buying a barbell and dumbbells, which I don't think is necessary for someone getting into working out, unless you want to, of course. Which one is actually better, or which one is more useful for someone who wants to get a lot of bang for their buck? Now, you might think that a barbell is actually the most basic piece of training equipment that someone should get first, because most people think of the big three, so squat, deadlift, and bench press, as a staple of beginner training, of getting into working out. A lot of people actually recommend to beginners to start with the big three to build some base strength and mass, and then maybe add different exercises on top of that. And I've actually talked in the past about the fact that I think this is very bad advice, because the big three actually lack a lot of muscle groups to a very significant extent. And I don't think doing too heavy lower body exercises is necessarily what a beginner needs, as opposed to something like a pull-up, a dedicated pulling exercise that's actually going to work your lats. But even when we look at other aspects, in my opinion, it becomes abundantly clear that, and this might be a bit of a controversial take, dumbbells are better than a barbell in almost every conceivable way. First of all, you can do almost any barbell exercise with dumbbells. However, you can do a ton of additional exercises with dumbbells that you cannot do with barbells. So if we think of, say, a bench press, right? Bench press, typical staple barbell movement. You can do a bench press with dumbbells. Only you can also do flies with dumbbells. You can do like a variation that's kind of a cross between a press and a fly with dumbbells. If we look at something like a bent over row, we can do a bent over row with dumbbells, but we can also do a one-arm row with dumbbells. We can actually much more easily support our upper body on something like a one-arm row, which means we can isolate the lats and the traps more than we could on a bent over row. And I'm not going to go through every single exercise you can do with a barbell, but you kind of get the gist. Generally speaking, you can do most, if not all, barbell exercises with dumbbells, or at least a very close approximation of the barbell exercise. But then with dumbbells, you can do things like reverse flies. You can do lateral raises. Essentially every movement where the weight is not moving in a straight line either towards or away from your body is impossible to do with a barbell. If you are moving your arms in that direction or in that direction, that's not something you can do with a barbell. But again, almost anything you can do with a barbell is possible with dumbbells, or you can find a very close variation that you can do with dumbbells. And since I just mentioned the one-armed row, another benefit when it comes to dumbbells is that on a lot of movements, which you can actually do with a barbell, the benefit of having dumbbells is that you can isolate one side. So if you have a weaker left side, for instance, on, let's say, the row, you can actually specifically train your left side a little bit more because you can do the row separately for your right and your left side, and you can just do a few reps more with the left. Push yourself a little harder with the left to close that strength gap or that size gap, whatever your goals may be. This, of course, goes for any kind of exercise that you might want to do with just one arm. Let's say a curl or something like a triceps extension, and like a overhead extension. That's something you can do with one arm if you want to, again, close a strength or size gap very easily with dumbbells. And that's simply not possible with a barbell. Now that I've talked about immediate training application a little bit, let's actually look at mid to long-term benefits, because I think a big bonus, a big pro of dumbbells compared to a barbell is the fact that when you're doing an exercise, your wrists can automatically, naturally adjust their rotation as you go through the motion a little bit. And this can be on a row, this can be on a press, doesn't really matter. The thing is, by naturally adjusting your wrists, because these two weights are not connected, and so your wrists can move freely a little bit during the movement, the exercise you're doing, you are actually preventing wear and tear on your elbow joints, because this means that you can much more naturally move your arms, as opposed to a barbell where, of course, your wrist position is fixed. And this also means that the angle at which your elbows are being hit with the weight that you're moving is also fixed. And I don't think I have to go into this too much. I believe it's very well established, well known in the fitness, lifting, bodybuilding, powerlifting, what have you, community, that doing a lot of barbell work, doing a lot of repetitive movements with your elbows in that, just ever so slightly imperfect position will cause wear and tear over the long term. If you do a ton of barbell curls, a ton of bent over rows, a ton of, that kind of stuff, sooner or later, you might run into some issues with your elbows, things like tennis elbow, golfer's elbow, etc. So that is something you can very much prevent by using dumbbells, which will automatically, allow your body to go through the motion in a more natural, a more joint-friendly way, if you will. Finally, if we're talking about someone who wants to train anywhere, anytime, maybe you have to travel a lot due to work, things of that nature, a very simple benefit when it comes to dumbbells is, of course, that they are just easier to transport. A barbell is very long, very big, like it's an impractical object to transport. It's certainly not impossible, of course, but something like a barbell is a lot harder, or can be a lot harder, to even just fit into a normal sized, like 4-person car. Whereas dumbbells, as long as your backpack or bag or bike or whatever can actually carry the weight, dumbbells are very compact and you can very easily store them and transport them and stuff of that nature. I don't think this is necessarily the most important factor, the biggest benefit, but it certainly is a plus. Now, something I haven't told you on this channel before is that I'm actually a psychic. And right now, my psychic powers are telling me that you, my dear barbell enthusiast, are sitting in front of your screen and screaming, "But barbells let you lift more weight." And that is true. And it is generally a question of stability and balance. See, if we look at something like, again, a bent over row, I think is a good example of like a typical barbell movement. This is a compound exercise that doesn't just compound different muscles, different muscle groups. It also compounds the strength of the two halves of your body, left and right. What I mean by that is, if I were to do a bent over row, and not a one-armed row, let's try to get as close to the barbell bent over row as possible with dumbbells, just for the sake of comparison, right? Let's say I am doing a bent over row, same grip, right? Pronated grip, with dumbbells versus a barbell. The movement pattern might be essentially the exact same. However, in one case, I am moving one very long weight with both sides of my body. In the other case, I am moving two separate weights with each half of my body individually. And what this means is, again, going back to the example I mentioned earlier of, say, your left side being a little weaker, if your left side is not quite as strong as your right side, you can just pull more weight with a barbell, because your right side can compensate for that a little bit, since you are pulling the weight with both sides of your body. Now, of course, if your left side is infinitely weaker than your right side, that's not going to make a huge difference, but that is usually not the case. And if your left side is just a little bit weaker, let's say on an isolation exercise where you would train the two sides individually, you might get like 2, 3, maybe 4 reps more with your right. If that is the case, then yes, if we're looking at a bent over row and we're doing both sides at the same time, whether or not we're using a barbell or a dumbbell, then you will be able probably to do more reps / do the same amount of reps with more weight with a barbell, simply because of the fact that you're using your entire body and not training the two halves of your body separately. So in essence, the barbell allows us to balance out our body's total strength, if you will, a little bit more, whereas dumbbells will automatically target specific muscles more because the weights are not connected. Here's the thing though. Yes, you can lift more weight with a barbell in the example I just talked about. But is that actually desirable? Because at this point, if your right side is compensating for the weakness of your left side, that means, number one, you are not specifically training your left side more to close that strength gap, to close that size gap, whatever. In fact, arguably you are doing the opposite, because you were doing a symmetric movement. Your left side starts giving out, so your right side compensates for that a little bit more. So technically, your right side is actually doing more work than your left side. Because while you're still doing the movement with both hands, as we have established, your left side is kind of quitting, which means automatically your right side has to train harder. And of course, the point of training is not to lift the most weight possible. I mean, the purpose of you training might be to then lift as much as possible, right? If that's what you want to do, if you want to bench a ton of weight, or you want to deadlift, or you want to do a pull-up with a ton of weight attached, do your thing. But the training is supposed to prepare you for that, if anything, right? The training is supposed to make you big. The training is supposed to make you strong. The training is supposed to make you athletic, fit, capable. The purpose of the training itself is not necessarily to lift the most weight possible. That can be fun, that can be enjoyable, and that's definitely something you can do every now and then on training. But of course, the purpose of the training is, first and foremost, to actually train you. And so if a barbell allows me to lift a little bit more weight because I'm actually doing an exercise in a way that is not necessarily more beneficial to me, is that a plus when it comes to training? I would argue no, not really. And of course, this also increases the risk of injury. The wonkier you do an exercise, the more potential there is for injury. I am definitely not a proponent of always using perfect form, whatever that may be, and doing every exercise like excruciatingly slow, whatever that is supposed to do for you. I do think you should do exercises with some level of control. You should definitely not let the weight drop into your joints, if you will. So if you're doing a bent over row, the go-to example of this video, if you're pulling up the weight and you're just dropping it, and it's dropping like full force into your elbow joint, not a good thing. But beyond that, as long as you're controlling the weight to some extent, do what you will. However, the jankier your form gets, and especially the jankier your form gets without you necessarily noticing 100% or being in control of it 100%, the higher the risk of you getting injured. And that is certainly the case if we look at what I just mentioned with the right side compensating for the left. This is something that might happen almost subconsciously or start happening at a very slow pace to a very small degree where you might not notice it and you might adopt kind of a skewed uh, upper body position. Like you might start to sort of lean to one side a little bit, things of that nature, some slight scoliosis, what have you. Overall, I think I've made clear that, in my opinion, this supposed benefit is not actually something that's particularly desirable. Now, when it comes to presses, to an overhead press, to a bench press, your typical pushing movements, barbells do actually require less stabilization because the weight is a lot more stable laterally. So if we think of a bench press, I got the weight over me right here. Then, of course, if these are two separate weights, if these are dumbbells, they can move this way, they can move that way, they can move this way, they can move that way. So they can move back and forth, and they can move to the left and right. And I have to stabilize these weights in all of these directions, so essentially 360, to do this exercise properly with relatively clean, consistent form. If I think of a barbell, then of course, because my two hands are fixed together, because the barbell is right here, there is much less stabilization required laterally, because the weight moving in this direction is a lot less likely. Because the weight is fixed at 2 points and not just at one, it's just more stable laterally, and it can still move back and forth, but I can just focus on the exercise a lot more. I have to invest less effort and less mental focus into stabilizing the weight. However, on chest presses, the barbell also doesn't allow me to go into a deep stretch, especially if I'm someone who doesn't have a big wingspan. I am not getting the same kind of range of motion, not even remotely, as I would if I was doing a dumbbell press. Because, of course, since the bar is right here, as we've established, when I go down, the exercise is over when the bar touches my chest. If these are two separate weights, sky's the limit. I can go as far as I can actually go. I can go full range of motion. And so I just get more range. I get a deeper stretch, just a bigger range of motion on that deep end with dumbbells. And because of this, despite the fact that with a dumbbell press, you need to stabilize more, and thus you can, of course, not use as much weight as you would be able to with just a regular barbell bench press, I have actually seen several people, and I've also seen this on myself, making better chest gains, actually growing their chest better with dumbbells. Because yes, you can use a little less weight, it's a little less stable, but that extra range of motion, the fact that you can actually go much deeper into the chest stretch, makes a huge difference. And it definitely made a huge difference for me compared to the regular bench press. If you ask me, there's really only one undisputable benefit to the old long boy, which is the fact that it's easier to overload with small weight increments. And that is for the simple reason that the barbell only has two sides. Now, of course, a dumbbell also has two sides, but if you're using two dumbbells as opposed to a barbell, and each of them has two sides individually, that's four sides. What does that mean? That means if we actually take a look at some weight. This is a fairly small weight plate. Actually, it's, I think due to the sun, you can't see shit. So this is 2 kilograms. This is a relatively small increment, right? A very small, a very light plate, and thus a comparatively small increment, potentially, if I want to up the weight on my bent over row or my bench press, what have you. Let us assume that this is the smallest plate I have, which is actually true. It is the smallest plate I have. What this means is that I can increase the weight on a barbell exercise by, 2 kilos? By 4 kilos, right? 2 kilos on each side. I cannot do the same for the dumbbell equivalent because, again, 2 sides individually on both dumbbells, 4 sides in total, I would actually have to up the weight by 8 kilograms if I want to keep my dumbbells the same weight and also keep the weight symmetrically distributed across them. However, and you might be thinking right now, how is this guy gonna turn this last bit of hope for the barbell into something bad again? No, I do actually think this is a benefit when it comes to barbells, but I don't think it's a huge negative when it comes to the dumbbell, because a lot of exercises that you do with dumbbells, for instance, something like reverse flies, something like lateral raises, can actually be done with an asymmetrically loaded dumbbell. So I can attach 2 extra kilograms to just one side of a dumbbell, and then depending on which way I'm holding it, so whether the weight is at the front or the back, this doesn't ruin an exercise for me, and actually in some cases can help me emphasize the muscle I do want to hit, again on something like lateral raises, more, because the weight is pulling or pushing in a specific direction. It's pulling, pushing on a specific side. So yes, this is a benefit to, the barbell, but I don't think it's a huge detriment when it comes to dumbbells. And I do think most dumbbell exercises, maybe it would suck on like a curl, but other than that, a lot of dumbbell exercises you can definitely do with an asymmetrically loaded dumbbell. So overall, all things considered, my recommendation to someone looking to buy training equipment, and especially if you're a teenager or a young adult and you're short on cash, buy dumbbells. Maybe grab a barbell at a later point if you really, really want to, but it's definitely not a necessity. And that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed yourselves, found this interesting, maybe learned something. If you derived any benefit from this video in any way, shape, or form, go ahead and leave a like. And if you want to see more videos of mine in the future, if you want to support the channel, if you want to help me grow and follow me on my journey, go ahead and subscribe and activate the notification bell if you want notifications. If you have any questions, any comments, if you want to shit on me for shitting on the barbell, go ahead and leave a comment. And if you, want to talk about something more generally, or you're interested in a certain type of video, so you have a suggestion, a question that maybe I should address in a future video, you can also go ahead and leave a comment or hit me up on Instagram. My Instagram is always down below in the description, and you can just DM me if there's something you want to see, if there's something you want to talk about. Go ahead. Yeah, I think that's it. I hope you guys, again, had an epic start into an epic new year. This is going to be an awesome one for me, certainly, and I hope for you guys as well. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Until then, have a good one.